Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today on building smarter courses faster, AI for everyday workflows. This is actually a follow-up to a webinar that we had recently with Patrick about a couple months back, where we did a kind of a high-level overview of how are we leveraging AI to build a program, and we wanted to turn that actually into a little bit of a deeper dive of specifically, so less kind of concepts and theory and PowerPoint decks and more working in the tools, showing, giving some ideas to those that maybe are already leveraging AI, just looking for a little bit of help. Maybe you're not leveraging it and you just want some ideas. Whichever bucket you fall into, we're glad to have you here. Also, do want this to be incredibly interactive. We were really fortunate last time to have an incredibly active chat, and I think the value of that, especially in a forum like this, listen, Patrick nor myself, probably nor just about anybody else in our ecosystem at least, can read the tea leaves of where AI is going or is a certified AI expert. Where maybe Patrick and I are considered experts because we've been using it more than others, but using it more than others means we have 2 years of experience instead of 6 months of experience. So we're learning with you many times along the way. One thing I do want to get out of the way as well, interesting, on the day that we are going to do a webinar on the topic of AI, there is a service called Cloudflare that a lot of these AI tools leverage to run their prompts and to do the work on the back end. Well, that went down this morning for like the first time I can remember. It's also the website that dictates Twitter, X, and most popular enterprise websites. So we've done our best to create some fail-safe, some recordings, but we are gonna, part of the session was to build live programs so you can see what we're doing. So if you see a little bit of a disruption, just know it's Cloudflare. We have zero control of that. Trust me. We couldn't have less control of Cloudflare. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Again, we don't have I don't have a ton of slides, so don't worry about that. Just a tiny bit. Infopro learning, been in the space for 30 years. You can see all the great things that that we do. Long story short, if you're developing your people, if you're looking to develop your people, we can support you, whether that's strategy, execution, everything in between. Um, uh, the two people you have on today, I'm Nolan Hout, Senior Vice President here at Infopro Learning, and we've got Patrick Peterson, who's a Product Director at Duke Corporate Education. As I mentioned, both of us have been fairly involved in AI kind of from the beginning. Both of us leverage AI in our daily lives and have helped our teams implement it and helped some of our clients implement it. So we've got experience not just from what we personally have done, but from the experiences that we've learned from working with various clients in various different situations. I will say that most of our experience does stem from, I would say, more of an enterprise size, use case, working with large organizations. Before this, Patrick was at Deloitte, and obviously their client base is large, and same with Infopro. So if you're one of those organizations who feel, well, gosh, we're this large, big machine, and maybe AI won't apply or it's too hard, I can assure you there are roadblocks. For sure there are, but we have found ways around that. We'd be happy to talk a little bit about that if needed. But obviously, if you're a small organization, I think the same things apply to you. Now, the benefit is, your downside is maybe your budgets are not as big, but the plus side is you maybe have a little bit of less barriers in the way. Um, quick agenda, we're going to follow through here. We're going to talk a little bit about where we all are with AI today. We're going to talk about using AI for needs analysis, then building some storyboards, generating knowledge checks, and prompts to get you started. Again, with the idea being, let us get you up into the point of actually creating the visual elements of it. So this podcast is really everything before you get to the creation, of the storyline, or whatever you're using to produce the content. We will have another session on that though. So if that's what you came for, don't worry. We're absolutely going to do another session on how to build those, graphics and things like that. Before we start, the first thing I want to just get out there is an understanding of how we're all feeling about AI. And just put it in the chat. this can be, and really what we're looking for here is like an adjective, scared, happy, elated, innovative, whatever it is. What is your feeling on AI? Um, I'm gonna just start saying some out here. We've got optimistic, yes, integrated, excited, opportunity, overwhelmed, absolutely. How can you not be overwhelmed? Just learning, heck yeah. I think we're all just learning. I think it's, AI with many things in life. Um, you should always just be learning. That's how you continue to learn. The second you think you know it all, you've lost. Ever evolving, absolutely, Stu. Patrick, how do you feel about AI?
Mm. Um, it's a good question, and I'm like, I like seeing the comments in the chat. I am reflecting on a couple things. One is the point that you made, Nolan, earlier about Cloudflare. As instructional designers, and Nolan, I know you have boatloads of experience on instructional design. I've been in instructional design and adult learning for almost 20 years. It is rare, in at least in most of that career, there has rarely been a technical issue preventing me from doing my core work. I mean, really rare.
Yeah,
Occasionally, like the email, like there's an email thing, or occasionally there's like
yeah,
some problem, but even that didn't really affect my core work. Um, this Cloudflare thing, I mean, this is the first time that this has happened before. But this isn't the only outage that we have seen even this year. Amazon Web
correct.
Services went down earlier this year. I think there's been some like issues with Microsoft Azure. This isn't singling out any one company or platform. But as I reflect on that, the thing that I am thinking of, and the thing that I talk a lot about, that I talk to my clients a lot about, is these tools have a lot of potential in learning and development. Um, and as like the other side of that potential is we have to think differently about the way that we work.
Hmm.
I would not have, if my team had like a team member had like emailed me or pinged me and said, "Hey, I can't get into my computer." That would have been an odd experience. I can't do my work because like my computer is not working for some reason. That would have been a very odd message. I would not
Yeah.
expect to see that frequently. Increasingly, as these tools become more integrated, those messages will come in. And I think what that means as leaders in instructional design and leaders in learning, we have to be better at thinking, how do we refresh our workflows? How do we refresh the way that we do business so that we can use these tools effectively, but also pivot as needed? That's just a thing that I'm kind of thinking about.
Yeah, I feel like, somebody put ever evolving in there.
Mm,
So all these words, except for scared, nobody had scared here. That's one that's missing. But if I would look at my arc, optimistic, integrated, excited, opportunity, overwhelmed, just learning, ever evolve, that would describe how I have felt over my adoption and current adoption and continuing the adoption. So I think ever evolving probably captures it the best. But one thing that I feel for me is very top of mind. It's and I realized that after giving a presentation at a conference on I got a comment from a person, and I could tell that that person felt um, like I was, you know, uh, part of like big AI, right? Like I was
mm,
big AI pushing some agenda down. And I realized that's not really right. But that's not how I feel, I should say. Her perception is her reality, and that's fine. But what I realize now is I'm in a very interesting thought process of AI where I've recognized and actually have all these things I think are kind of describing AI as a very sharp tool.
mm,
Now, I think it's important as leaders, and me being a leader in my org, and also a thought leader, is to make sure that when I'm talking about AI, and especially with a podcast, a webinar like this that is very much promoting all of the very good things of AI, Patrick and I, we're not being cheerleaders over here. We're not just cheering it on as some blind, hey, AI is great and AI is everything and blah, 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 because the sword definitely cuts the other way, right? We just read the Challenger report. AI was cited as one of the top reasons for the job losses in October.
Mhm.
That's a big thing. We're simultaneously being told adopt AI, and a lot of the words we're using are adopt AI, don't worry, it's not going to take your job, while we're seeing it take people's jobs. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important. I want to acknowledge the fact that that is the world that we just live in, and I'm kind of grappling with, where do you kind of fall on that? And I realize, well, I don't need to fall anywhere. That is the reality, is that it is a sharp tool. But the option to not use AI also is not on the table. I kind of am drawing a parallel to when the email was created, and if everybody in your department was writing letters, right? Because you said, it's not allowing me to be as creative as I want. It's some machine. It's not unpersonal. They're trying to automate my job. It's going to take away my job. If you're the only one stuck, you and your team are the only ones still handwriting letters when everybody else understands email, you're doing yourself a disservice. But more importantly, as a leader, you're not building those skills in your team, because the
Yeah.
eventuality is they're going to be forced to use it. So, or have to use it, or they're going to be left behind. So that's really honestly like, I know that's maybe a very long-winded answer, but that's that I think ever evolving kind of describes this thought of where I am today. Not as a cheerleader saying it's great. I mean, I am a cheerleader in the fact that I think it does amazing things. It is an incredibly good performance tool. You'll see a lot of things here that, oh my gosh, the time it took to do this pre-AI is just baffling. But we also need to understand there is the other side of the coin, to it.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I think it's a really insightful point, and one that I think a lot of folks are struggling with. There is a wonderful book. It came out earlier this fall. It's called Empire of AI by Karen Howe.
Hmm.
Hao is how she spell is spelling of her last name. Really lovely book. Very worth picking up. Yeah, she was a writer at MIT Technology Review, and a
Hmm.
number of other journals. She sort of covered OpenAI and focuses most of her research on OpenAI, but covered OpenAI throughout its fairly tumultuous period of time, and she presents many of the questions that I think folks who would describe themselves as AI skeptics share. Environmental impact,
Yeah.
the privacy concerns, copyright concerns. All of these are real concerns. And oh, thank you, Lori, for sharing that in the book. Oh, it is a wonderful book. Really recommend reading. It's also a great audiobook. But at the closing chapter offers some different modes of thinking about AI.
Hmm.
There are some specific technology decisions that underpin all generative AI tools, or most generative AI tools that most people use, whether it's OpenAI, Google Gemini,
Hmm.
or Anthropic's tools, any of the tools. Uh, but those choices are not necessary. They're not always, those are choices. There were
Right.
other choices that could be made. We could create AI models that are much smaller, that are maybe less accurate, that do less, but require less investment in power and infrastructure. We could think of different models for how we compensate creators for materials that are used for training. That is, there are other ways to, we could think about how do we use these tools, and how do we build these tools more effectively. And I share that story, and I think it's worth reflecting on because, Nolan, to your point, every technological innovation in work has led to disruption,
Hmm.
from the beginning, from the end of the Middle Ages to today, and I think we are seeing a level of disruption in using the transformation of AI. Some of that is hype, some of that is real, but I think as leaders, what this offers the opportunity. There's a challenge in managing that, and I think it's very important for leaders to be thoughtful about how to thoughtfully integrate these tools into their workflows. But there's some opportunities too. You can think about how much time do your workers spend doing things that are repeatable processes that have been well defined, involving the processing of information from one system to another. Those are types of tasks that humans don't like, that there's like errors on, that are important to execute modern business.
Yeah.
AI can be a tool to reduce some of those things, which yes, then yes, it may mean that you need fewer workers, which is in and of itself its own problem for various reasons. But it offers you the opportunity to think about, if I had 40 hours of my team's most creative, most human, most interesting space in their brain to function, what would I use that on? What could
Hmm.
I use that? What would that offer what does that offer me the opportunity to do? Um, and I think that to me is like the key promise.
Yep.
Yes, these tools are having major impact. I think that there are individual business societal choices that need to be made in order to make that disruption as humane and effect and humane as possible. But I also think that this offers the opportunity to really rethink, what do we mean by work? What do we mean by the work that people do? How do we value that? How do we value the human part of work? Compensate them appropriately for that work, and give people the opportunity to, look, you're put on this earth for 80 some years. I'm sure most people do not want to spend the majority of that time sending and responding to emails. So maybe AI can help us out with that a little bit.
So let's get into that then. Let us get into how can we leverage AI to help us have more time in our day. Patrick, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can give it over to you. Let me
Sure.
know if you have any issues accessing it.
I will do that. Let me know. If you could just, if in the chat, folks could give me just a quick thumbs up when you see my screen. This is going to be a busy screen. I'll walk you through it. Let me move the chat out of the way so that I can see everybody. If you just give me one moment. So can you all see my screen? Okay, great. So this is a product. This is called Notebook LM. It is a tool that was created by Google, and we'll be using the Google Suite for today. I am using Google Suite because I have Google's AI service, but there are equivalent services at Copilot has a version of this, and I believe OpenAI does as well. Notebook LM is known as a tool that is purpose built to manage one of the most important challenges of AI, which is hallucinations. AI is a statistical model. They are tools that are designed to predict the next best word in the sentence. So they are great at generating content and can be terrible at knowing whether that content is true or false. And there are some technical reasons behind that are not really worth getting into here. Notebook LM, though, is a tool that is designed to minimize hallucinations. And the way that it does that is it trains its knowledge only on the sources that you upload it. So its ability to speak and respond in English is trained on sort of a general, corpus of knowledge, so that it can process language. But its subject matter knowledge is only on the things that you upload. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to restrict its knowledge and get better results. So in this use case, the first thing that we're going to show, what you'll notice here, and I've kind of made the window odd, just to kind of show what we have. So what I have done is I've created a notebook. A notebook is a collection of documents and a specific chat for the context that I am providing. And you'll notice in here a bunch of documents. I pulled these documents. There are several types of documents, and I'll kind of walk through what some of these things are so that we can orient ourselves. But in one of the things that I am working through right now for one of my clients is developing a leadership development program for folks who are newly promoted managing directors, and it's a financial services company. This is a training that they have never had before. This is going to be part of their milestone training, and we are executing our standard instructional design process to develop a leadership development program for this group. So kind of a workflow that many of you in the instructional design world may be familiar with. What you will have noticed here is I have uploaded several documents, number of documents to this notebook. You'll see I have some, let's ignore the source buttons, the stuff right now, but you'll see I've labeled some things with instructional design. These are the tools and frameworks and reference guides that I use when I am executing my instructional design process. It includes things like toolkits for conducting a training needs assessment, ways to think about how do we do competency analysis, when we are planning for reports to executives, some sort of checklists and things like that. These are reference guides that I use all the time. So I've included these because I want the tool to understand those references, that subject knowledge of instructional design that forms the basis of my work. You'll also notice here that I've labeled interviews 1 through 11. These are transcripts of stakeholder interviews that I have conducted with various stakeholders. What I did this morning was these are actual transcripts, but what I did this morning is I used an AI tool to go in and sanitize those transcripts. So I removed the name of the company that we're working with, removed the name of the some of the subject names of folks so that we can kind of share this material today. But we have 11, I've uploaded 11 of the stakeholder interviews that we've provided. These were the majority of the interviews that we conducted. Each of these interviews is about 35 pages long. They were hour-long transcripts, and follow a standard approach for user stakeholder interviews that we've developed. So each of these, like about 30 or so pages long. This is quite a large volume of information. And in those interviews, just sort of participating in those interviews, one of the things that came up as a gap for this workforce, this managing director workforce, is the concept of ambidextrous leadership. So the idea of, at this level, finding ways to balance strategic execution of tasks, people leadership, business development, are the three sort of areas of this, the three skills that these managing directors need to balance on a day-to-day basis. And they are struggling with this. That's one of the things that we've heard from these interviews. So what you'll notice here are research. These are research. This is academic research. Other sort of organizations that we are using as trusted sources, other things that we have found that we're using to build our subject matter knowledge of what is ambidextrous leadership, and what are the core skills that a leader who is executing this ambidexterity, what are the core skills that they need to have. So lots of different information here. What I can do with this information is I can then chat with the specific language model to learn more about this, about these tools. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to put together a draft needs analysis from the information that I have just gathered. So I have stakeholder interviews. I have subject matter knowledge of the ambidexterity that I know is a focus of this session, and I have an approach that we typically do to training needs assessment. Given these three pieces of information, I have asked Notebook LM to produce a report on the stakeholder analysis, to start to produce a training needs analysis document. So, as you imagine your own teams using these types of tools, think about, and I really kind of, be curious to see in the chat, um, and Ahmad, Afsar, excuse me, I will absolutely share the materials that I can. Thank you for sharing. But the just to sort of put in the chat, curious to hear how long does it usually take your teams to do a training needs analysis absent the stakeholder interviews? Are we looking at a couple days, a couple weeks? Is it longer? How long does the producing of the training needs report typically take? Curious to hear. If you want to, feel free to drop that in the chat. I'm just curious to hear how long it
And
takes for this
well,
process.
and while you're doing that, important to call out as well, because Patrick had mentioned absent of the interviews. Also, another good actual application of AI is you can say, I'm conducting a training needs analysis. Can you give me an interview script that I can use? So, like, you can
Yeah.
even go even a little bit more meta and say, I don't even know what I should be asking these people about because I don't know this topic. So,
Mhm.
as people are answering, that's another good application if you just want a starting ground.
Yes, and I may have done that to generate the interview script. I mean, some of this is a sort of a cognitive load.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of multiple things, you need sometimes it's helpful. It's often helpful to have something.
Yeah.
I'm seeing weeks. I'm seeing a couple weeks here. That is my experience as well. These things can take quite some time. And this is time that is important time for your team to work. But it is time that often can be time that you're not spending with your stakeholders. You're not spending kind of like being strategic about thinking about what do you do with this information. You're spending a lot of time generating the information that has a fairly short shelf life. I asked this is the prompt that I asked this morning. Analyze the feedback themes in the stakeholder interviews. Use a structured approach to the training needs assessment, which is something that I produced earlier, to produce a needs assessment for this population. A fairly simple prompt, but what I asked it to do was to take the interviews, take the probably hundreds and hundreds of pages of interviews, take the how we do training needs assessment in our organization, and take some basic information about ambidexterity and leadership, and to start generating a feedback, some themes, and a draft assessment. What you will see in this document, which is what I'm kind of showing over here, is a report, is a draft report. Some of the themes that we're seeing here to call out the shift from producer to leader and mentor. There is a gap in self-awareness that we saw from these interviews. And
Mm.
then there was this concept that came up in the interviews. It was sort of they kept calling it the three-legged stool, and several people brought up this metaphor of the idea of practice development, business development, and client execution. This was a thing that the tension between how do you manage all three of those pillars was something that we talked a lot about, that was sort of highlighted a lot about. So as I was preparing the needs assessment, that was something that we definitely included, and that is something that the LLM picked up on as well. There's some more information in here. An interesting thing that I did not necessarily ask it for was for to kind of use to include in the training needs assessment was to include some content around
Mm.
instructional modalities. How users how this group likes to learn. It was as I remember the interviews, that did come up in conversation, but it was almost always as a kind of a side conversation. It was not part of the main conversation. I'm really glad that that the tool included it though, because as we start to think about how are we going to teach these courses, having that as a reminder, I think it will be very helpful. Um, you can see a training needs assessment. I mean, I'm happy to kind of share this as well. I would say, as an instructional designer who has done this for a really long time, there are probably things that I would change. There are things that I would want to edit. There are things that I would want to go back to the interviews and verify are actually there. Um, but as a first start, as something that I can build from, I would say this is pretty good from a very first start. Um, and I think that's the power of these tools. I think we are a very long way away from turning your entire workflow over to AI. Um, and yeah, I think we have a distance to travel before that happens, and I think a lot of decisions to make. Um, but to me, the power of these tools are that they enable you to get something on paper that you can then edit as an editor versus as a creator. And so, that's kind of a use case that I would encourage you as you are exploring AI, as you are exploring these tools, to kind of adopt that mindset. Don't go into the tool and say, generate a course for me. Because what you will, I mean, it will do it, but the course you will get will be bad, or it will be very high level and
Yeah,
it might miss something important.
and I'm gonna take the screen over real quick,
Yeah.
Patrick, and then I'll give it back to you to do the storyboard. But there's a couple things that I want to make sure that people caught on. He said when we're conducting the training needs analysis, one of the things that I put in the tool was what is my company's approach to a TNA, to a training needs analysis. It's really important. I think a lot of times when we look at the value that AI has, we're talking time, which is our most, valuable commodity. Um, but also there's this idea of scalability and uniformity in conducting training needs analysis, right? Every employee can now be your best employee. And I'll showcase just kind of a little bit. I'm using Claude, so for me personally, and this is just a small tip, somebody had asked me, so I'll show you. Most tools, Claude or ChatGPT or something, will have some type of like universal uh, law that it abides by, right? And so this is my universal law. I'll put it in here. I'll put it in the chat so that you can leverage it if you want. And I have found this to be a very simple but very, very important prompt because, and I'm just going to give you some thing, and it will make sense when I get to the next screen. But the first one is to never make up information, whether it be stats, use cases, or stories. It is very, very bad. Most LLMs are very bad at lying. They don't intend to lie. They don't mean to lie because their intention is to just make you happy. And they'll do whatever it takes to make you happy along the way. So first, making it up front. No, anytime I write to you, don't tell a lie. Provide numbers that are not real. When you do provide numbers, though, make sure you link to where that stat was listed so that I can go and get that information. Also really important, saves you a ton of time. As Patrick said, even if you're sourcing internal documents, it will say this is where I got it from. Saves you a lot of time if you need to go back and double check that. And last, give me brutally, this is I think probably the most important sentence in my AI usage is give me brutally honest feedback instead of telling me what I want to hear when asking for advice. This will change the nature of how your agent and how AI is talking to you. It will go away from the golden retriever, just want to make you happy, do everything you say, to actually challenging the way that you think. Really, really important. Now, what Patrick was talking about earlier was, how do we make sure that everything is the same? So most every LLM, whether you're using Anthropic's Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, Notebook, Gemini, they have these things called projects. Some call them agents. It doesn't really matter. And this is where you put in this kind of text, right? Like, so this is one for a marketing of a leadership catalog. This is where you create uniformity. So you're saying that no matter what I do, no matter what I'm doing, this is the approach I want to take. So imagine this built out for your team where you have project instructions on what is your approach to training needs analysis. How, what is the tonality of your content? What does your brand guidelines look like? You can load all these things in here, all these documents in, so that every time that you're leveraging these tools, it's doing so in a uniform way. So just because I wanted to, I think the speed is the obvious answer, but there's also some really cool things that make it more uniform. Because what ends up happening is if every person on your team is using these tools in their own way, you end up getting 7 different types of outputs because the model is adapting to your personal usage, not the company's personal usage. So wanted to call out a couple of those points.
Yeah, no, that's good to point out. And I think there was a comment in the chat too about using custom GPTs
Yeah,
as
same
a
thing.
as a
Yep.
tool, and sort of same concept. As we sort of go through, and as these tools become more widespread, kind of those tips I think are very helpful. That I will actually use that for you. I will steal that instruction from you, Nolan. One thing I usually have to remember to ask the tool to provide links to sources. I have seen in cases where, particularly like numeric sources, the data is just wrong. So
Yeah.
having that extra check is often helpful. But this sort of gets to the point around, I see these really as augmentation tools.
Hmm.
I think the companies will say, not just the companies and the large buyers of these tools will say that these are designed to be your pilot, or to be the things that will take over work. I don't think that has been borne out in the data. I read somewhere, I think it was a report from McKinsey that came out earlier this fall, something on the order of 80% of organizations in the United States, of large organizations in the United States, had invested in some AI prototype since 2022. Of those 80%, only 5% are still using that tool at the end, the summer of 2025. That
Hmm.
is a very low conversion rate. And I think what that means is these tools are easy to get started, but they're really hard to integrate it. So for leaders, what I think is really paramount to be thinking about is, how do we, one, understand what these tools are and have a really clear point of view on what they are? But then two, how do we redesign the people, the process, the governance frameworks that our team uses to work, so that we can actually derive value from these things? So that's sort of just a thing to think about as well.
Yeah,
Um,
another fun stat while you're pulling up your screen, and so we're
yeah.
going to pivot now. Now that we have the training needs, we'll pivot to kind of how do you create a storyboard. But another interesting stat uh, MIT Sloan came out with was that only 5% of AI projects achieved rapid revenue recognition. Um, and one of the biggest reasons cited for that was a lack of strategy. And so a lot of what you're seeing here, like what we're talking about, the way to build out your prompt, I want to encourage you. Um, I think the best way to start using AI is just to start using it. That was the best advice I was ever given. Just keep the tool open. Just have the tool, have it open make it the first tab you open every day. So definitely, as you're starting to adopt, that's the first thing you have to do is just to kind of play. But then once you do that, doing the things like we talked about of loading in the right documents, asking a good prompt versus just saying, give me a storyboard, um, putting in your templates, putting in your guides, that's how you start to use it a little bit more strategically, and see more consistent results. So again, but if you haven't started, if you haven't used it, just go use it. Don't get caught up in all those things. First, start using it, understand the power, then start building off these kind of second tier concepts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. So from the training needs assessment, next step is starting to work on a storyboard. And what you'll notice on the side here, this sort of studio, this is actually a feature that I think is unique to Notebook LM. So Copilot has a similar tool. It's called the Copilot Notebook, and is a great tool. What I particularly like about Copilot is its integration with the Microsoft 365 suite. So if you are a Microsoft organization, if you use Microsoft Outlook and Teams and all of those other and the Office suite, those tools are directly integrated into Copilot, and you can query Copilot about things in your email or things like Teams chats that are happening. This is extremely valuable when kind of trying to organize tasks and things like that. But Copilot Notebook is a very similar tool. Google's tool here is quite, I think, their studio tool, I think, is very interesting. You'll notice a video here. So this is a video that was created with generative AI. This was based specifically on the instructional design approach. And I'm not sure if my sound is going to go through right now, but what you will see here is I'm happy to kind of share this video. It is a simple explainer video, but it is not like the design is pretty basic. But what it does is it has two speakers speaking about instructional design methods. This was created entirely through generative AI. So I selected a bunch of sources, and then asked it to create an explainer video for me. It took about 10 minutes or so. And I'm not going to play the video because the audio comes in my voice and I can't really think or speak. So I'm going to skip that part, but I'll share this with you. But what I will share is some briefings and other types of materials around ambidexterity. So you've done the training needs assessment. You've understood that ambidexterity is a key component of this training course. The next step is to understand, well, what is ambidexterity? What is the research saying? How do we think about this? How do we actually start to create the content itself? So I mentioned that we had some research. We used Google to generate some of this research, and it includes both academic sources and kind of general knowledge sources like Harvard Business Review and things like that. It then created this report that describes what is this ambidexterity, how do we think about this, what do we need, what do we need people, or what are leaders who can exhibit this, what is a skill that they need to have. I find this very helpful because as an instructional designer, I don't always have the expert knowledge of this topic, the subject of the training. We have SMEs, we have subject matter advisors, subject matter experts who provide that, but I don't want to go into a meeting having zero understanding of the topic that we are teaching. I don't think that that's helpful for instructional designers. And these types of reports that was produced in about 30 seconds to a minute are things that I can use to build my knowledge base. So that was sort of the interim step. The next step we wanted to do is I wanted to ask it to start creating a storyboard, and you'll see in the chat here, I first asked it some of the same question here. This chat was asking it to summarize the instructional materials that I used, which include both traditional, the ADDIE-based instructional design approach, and the and agile or human-centered approaches. I use both of those approaches interchangeably, but I wanted it to synthesize those and use that to start to create a guide for how do we produce a storyboard. So then I said same approach. Use the material from the report on the training needs assessment, use the guide for how to produce a storyboard, and use the subject matter knowledge of ambidextrous leadership to start producing a storyboard structure that I can then start to use. What you will see here is a draft sort of outline I asked for a 90-minute session. That was sort of a constraint that I gave it. But what this is sort of the general sort of breaking down of this course into the submodules, the activities, and the types of subjects that would be taught in this course. What I didn't ask it to do here was I did not ask it to produce a slide deck of a storyboard. And the reason I didn't ask it to do that is because I wanted to be able to see and understand the overall structure of the module before I got too hung up on what does a slide look like and what is going to go where on the materials. This was really this was an opportunity for me to kind of get a high level prototype, something that I can like test and look at and review quickly, and then use that as a way to kind of think about how I'm framing this session. So it generated a storyboard. It had some kind of activities in here that it included, and then some other kind of like materials. I thought it was fine, but what you will see here, as I said, this is a good start. I'd like to build on it further. I asked specifically for more activities, takeaways, and other modalities that best resonate with this audience. I remember from reading the training needs assessment, and that I showcased earlier, that the group does not like a lot of slides. They do not like a lot of lecture. They want to get to tools, frameworks, and approaches as quickly as possible. So then it produced an updated training needs assessment that I think was a step in the right direction, but I think still probably needs some work. Again, this took about a couple minutes to produce an outline. It was something that I could do while I was also doing a few other things. I would not say that this is perfect. I would say this needs maybe a fair amount of work, but for something that I can build from, or for something that I can put in front of my team, ask them to read before a meeting, and then say, okay, so now that we've read this, how are we going to build the storyboard, is a much faster accelerator than having a team sit in a room for a week and a half or 2 weeks or however long it would normally take to put something together and get something in front of a client. Nolan, I'm curious, as you kind of think about the storyboards that you are doing, how do you see an approach like this resonating with your workflows?
Yeah, we are always kind of torn. So we're in many of you will share this depending on how your org is structured. Most of the work we do is on behalf of a client, right? Somebody has paid us to do this work. And so showing them the storyboard is usually the first kind of step in that process, right? Like that's the first thing we kind of showcase is that. And so there's a high reliance on getting that right. And what we have, but you have to kind of weigh that against, well, this is for my client and maybe they know the subject matter expertise. So how do I put this forth? I put this forth as a good draft. And I think that's what we've really found is we've been able to, as you mentioned, kind of be smart enough where in the past we would need so many interviews, so much time to learn about the client, to learn about the product. And then we'd probably have to have a couple different iterations before we even got to the storyboard. Now we can go back away like elves in Santa's workshop and create something and share it with the caveat, listen, this is the storyboard that we have based off of a laundry list of assumptions. But what we are finding is that in majority of the times, what we're able to produce, the speed and accuracy is as good as it took us when it took us a month just to get to the storyboard.
Mm.
Maybe 10% less accurate. There is a bit of a thing there. But we overcompensate that. So when we have the storyboard, since we did produce it in an hour or whatever, hour and a half, we do a manual. We have made a stance to have a human element in everything AI. We will never just do an AI thing. So we take a portion of that time we saved and actually invest it back into the manual review. So that's how we're seeing it. And the clients are really, really happy because they've had to do a lot less work. And, that's how it is. But the same thing happens internally when you're working on this project, right? You need to go to a SME. You need to go to whoever is asking for this to be done. And if you go there with something to show, it's just the human brain has been configured to be able to give you a better answer if you give it something to start with, right? There's some
Yeah.
principle that says if you want to get an answer to something, don't ask the question, propose an answer to the question, even though you know it's wrong, because people just can't help tell you that you're wrong. And I think it like plays into some of those concepts a little bit of oh, they've put this forth. I can see that they got it mostly right. Now let me just find where it's wrong and input the right element. Um, One thing I do want to, which I thought was really fascinating in a podcast episode recently, I was talking with a gentleman about how he uses AI, and you mentioned it a little bit. Like when you walk into the room, you don't want to go in blind. And so you use AI to kind of learn about things you wouldn't learn. He said that when I come across a request and in my mind, I say, that's not a training problem. Instead of going back to the person and try to convince them that's not a training problem, I use AI to help determine what the problem actually is. And it's tough because one day I'm trying to save create a sales training problem. The next day, a marketing problem. The next day, so these are all topics that I'm not an expert in. But if I can use AI to learn a little bit more and push back with a little bit more accuracy, and again, same thing, give it a big caveat. Hey, this could be wrong. This is just kind of what I see. What do you think? It's a really good way to kind of push back on that. This doesn't sound like a training problem, but I'm not just coming back to you with a problem. I'm coming back to you with an answer. So, kind of two answers in one, Patrick.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I use it a lot for that preparation, and I think that that's really helpful. I will note really quickly. So in this updated storyboard or updated kind of like outline, the tool proposed this sort of this contextual scenario of providing feedback, which is a reasonable thing to include for a training on feedback provision, which is a challenge that this group has. It is something that you could see how you could see this working. Because I have had the time and space to know my client a little bit better, I know that something like this would probably not work for a specific reason. But if I'm spending all of my time producing materials, if I'm spending my time drafting all of this content,
Yeah.
I don't have the time and the mental space to be able to
Yep.
do that as well. So it enables me to be a better advisor because I can be like,
Yeah.
no, that's wrong.
You know
But
what?
this is actually a process, thing I could do.
You know what? I have never thought of this before. I don't know how much you write. I write a lot.
Mhm.
And but I hate reading what I wrote. Like after I've done the draft, it's almost like I
Mhm.
don't ever want to see it again. I'm like, I can't stand to go back and look at it, but I have to. I got to proofread it. What I have found is that as I leverage AI to generate my drafts, I kind of remove that because it is my first time seeing it. So it actually if anybody else there is like me, where you've invested so much time to create the stupid document that you have no more bandwidth to edit it, this actually kind of flips that paradox. So we have Patrick. Anything else on the storyboard? Because I know we have 7 minutes left. Okay, I'll take it back. A couple things I want to
Yeah.
showcase. The next part we talked about was kind of there's two things I'm going to showcase quickly here. And I have some videos I can share. But so I wanted to call out that there are tools. I'm showing you our Infopro Learning's tool called Guru, not as a sales pitch, just to tell you there are tools out there. So a lot of people are asking, can I get this prompt or that prompt or whatever? There are specific tools out there that have been purpose driven, right? They've said if you're in marketing, you probably have to do these 20 things. So here's an AI, here's a custom version of AI that is designed just to help marketers. There's tools like that for L&D. This is the one that we created. So obviously, we developed this internally because we do this all day, but then we realized that there was so much value in all of these prompts that we started giving it away to our clients, and charging for it. But just to show that there are these tools out there that do make a little bit lighter work. You can do so all of these things here, all of these prompts, again, you can do in custom GPTs, things like that. Copilot Studio is another really good way to do this. But the basic concept, and again, it's a global prompt. I'll just share with you kind of the basic concept is you describe. Actually, let me show you a little bit of a better one. You kind of describe what it is that this prompt is trying to do, just in basic, language, but then you give prompt instructions. Now, this is really, really important. One, we talked about accuracy, but I'm just going to kind of slowly scroll. You can see how long this is. I mean, this is forever. This to do this prompt. And so when you're leveraging AI, do you want to go through writing all this prompt or finding your prompt library and your saved Word document that has them? This is a way that you'll see some commercial tools on the market are trying to make it a little bit easier for teams to create uniformity across their world. I was going to, interestingly enough, I was going to show how to leverage how to create knowledge checks in AI, leveraging Claude because I didn't want to be schlepping our tools and being a corporate, sales guy, I guess. But the problem is Claude was down this morning. So I used our tool because our tool was not down. So I'm not showing, I promise I'm not showing you this tool to say that our tool is the best for doing this. You can do the same thing I'm showing you in any other tool. This is just our tool. So what I'm going to do, similar to how Patrick did, I'm going to load in a document. And here, this is on actually AI prompt writing by HBR. So it's a very meta thing. So I'm going to load this in as my source content. And I say, I want you to act like an expert L&D professional in the corporate environment. Please create a couple versions of knowledge checks that I could insert into the training program. And it's going to start generating my response. Now, it's now going to ask me, okay, cool. Here's some different things. What type of training are you looking to develop? Now, this is another interesting wrinkle that I just want to point out. This is another custom feature of any LLM is how readily do you want it to give an answer? If you use some tools, if I just loaded this document in and did it, it would just give me the exact answer. Other tools are designed to coach you, kind of work with you along the way. You can also customize your GPT to make it do that. Ours is very much more consultative. So I'm going to say I'm going to have an e-learning program, but I also want to have a classroom environment at the end where people will be able to practice in a controlled environment. And it's going to say, okay, cool. And this is an interesting thing. So it's going to give, it's going to give me some things along the way. So here's kind of what it was giving me. Now, I was a bit frustrated at this point because although it's telling me kind of what should be in there, I wanted it to do the work for me because I'm lazy. I was like, so I ended up having to say, no, no, no. I want you to actually create a Word version of these knowledge checks, not just by applying what I should say, but I want the answers as well. And so it's actually going to think a little bit longer. And what it's going to do is create the exact same. And the reason I gave this such a wide prompt is to give you an idea of the various types of things. So this one is going to be just a read the prompt and identify its four main components. What is a persona role? Then it's going to give me an answer. If I continue on, it's going to go to exercise B, component matching, match A to B. So this would be like, your drag and drop kind of connect the dots thing. Knowledge check 2, prompt quality assessment. I can continue on. It's going to give me prompt building exercise. So this is the exercise that you would operate in the classroom. Knowledge check 4, troubleshooting. We're going to create problems and you're going to have to solve them in real time. So it can do, the last one is real world application, create your own prompt analysis, quick assessment, 1 through 5, answer key, what is the right ones. So again, this is something where you definitely want to go through and read it. Obviously, everything that AI generates, you want to have a human go back and verify. And maybe you could say like, well, none of this ever took me that long. And of course it didn't take you that long. But this whole video from start to end is 2 minutes. It surely took you more than 2 minutes to create all of the knowledge checks. So I know it's a small portion of what we do, but it's a really critical portion of what we do as well, and an easy way to save yourself 30 minutes on knowledge checks and building. And we're just over time now, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That was the last core component that we wanted. Um, uh, so I want to open up. If anybody has to leave, please, feel free to leave. Obviously, you have other meetings. Please hop to those. I can stick on, Patrick. I'm not sure about you. I can stick on for another 5 minutes or so. If anybody has questions, please do put those in there. Happy to stick around a little bit more if we didn't get to all the questions that were answered here. I read the long prompts. Okay, Patrick, you already answered that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
You know,
Well, no, go ahead, Patrick.
I'll just say, maybe to kind of close on Nolan, I think the point that you made about assessments. These tools save 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. You're starting to talk about real time, and I would just encourage you all to think about what could you do if your work, if you could give back, if you get back all of that time that on stuff that is tough, that is boring, that is not a
Yeah.
good use of your humans.
Yeah.
What does that enable you? How does that enable you to rethink your organization? And that's what I'm excited about AI, and I hope we can continue to kind of like pioneer in that space.
Yeah, it's the idea that if I can save 50% of time, that doesn't mean in my 2026 budget I'm going to ask for 50% less money.
No.
That's not what it is. It's I'm going to do 50% more with the money that you gave me last year. And can create the value that I generate 50% more value back. Um, so good. Well,
Yeah, for
thanks everyone.
sure.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks everybody for joining in. Really appreciate it. Connect with us, follow us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.